The Interstellar Academy's lecture hall was enormous, yet even its vastness couldn't contain the restless energy of the students packed inside. The chamber had been built to accommodate dozens of species, so its architecture looked more like an alien bazaar than classroom. Some desks hovered at different levels for winged species, while others had shallow water tanks for aquatic learners. A scattering of sealed environmental pods glowed faintly along the walls, each occupied by beings that required atmospheres unbreathable to the rest. The subject of the day was xenobiology, specifically predatory behavior across the galaxy. The students had been buzzing about it for cycles. Predator myths, after all, haunted nearly every species' folklore, whispered warnings encoded in evolution itself. Professor Tlar, a tall insectoid with a voice that clicked like glass marbles, clacked his mandibles together for silence. Today, he announced, we will experience predator calls firsthand. Not visual holograms, not diagrams, sounds. You will learn how apex species announce their dominance, not with presence, but with resonance. That single word, resonance, sent a ripple of unease through the hall. Many prey-evolved students shifted nervously in their seats, antennae twitching, spines quivering, or tails coiling tightly around themselves. Fear was biological. No lesson could untangle it. In the third row, however, sat a lone human, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, leaning back in his chair with an ease that seemed almost arrogant. His name was Daniel, though most classmates simply called him the Terran. Humans were still a curiosity in the academy, a species new to the galactic stage, too bold and too adaptable for comfort. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the hall. The professor lifted a claw and pressed a control node. The first sound filled the room, low, guttural, rising into a haunting scream that echoed like something torn from the depths of an ancient forest. It was a mix of growl and shriek, primal hunger wrapped in sound. Instantly, chaos rippled through the students. A feathered alien keen in distress, wings flaring. A reptilian hissed and pressed flat against its desk. Even some of the sealed pod occupants emitted panic vibrations that rattled glass. A dozen pheromonal scents flooded the room. Fear, alarm, the acrid chemical tang of instinctual terror. Daniel didn't move. In fact, he chuckled, a short, amused snort like someone hearing a half-forgotten joke. He leaned back further, resting his boots on the rung of his desk. Cougar, he said casually. That's just a cougar. The room froze. Every alien eye, compound, multifaceted, glowing, or slitted, swiveled toward him. The predator call still echoed faintly from the speakers, but the shock of his words overpowered it. Just a cougar? Hissed the scaled student, voice trembling. That sound was a harbinger of annihilation. Daniel shrugged, lips quirking in that infuriatingly relaxed human grin. Nah, back home we call them cougars. Or mountain lions. Big cats. You hear them sometimes if you're camping near the Rockies. He paused, tilting his head as though analyzing the recording. Yeah, definitely a cougar. Not a jaguar or leopard. They sound rougher. Cougar for sure. The professor's antennae twitched in disbelief. Human Daniel. Tlar said slowly, You recognize this apex predator's call? Of course, Daniel replied. It's not exactly uncommon. Creepy the first time you hear it, sure, but you get used to it. Worst case, you make yourself big, make some noise, and the cat user decides you're not worth the trouble. The classroom erupted, not in sound, but in body language. Horror, disbelief, confusion. For many, the idea of getting used to such a sound was madness. Predator encounters were rare and catastrophic for most species. Even their memory passed down in genes as terror. One timid avian raised a wing. Why you mean your people live where those things roam freely? Daniel blinked, as though the question itself was strange. Yeah, we don't exactly build cities in the middle of their hunting grounds, but they're around. You hear coyotes at night, too. Sometimes wolves. Bears if you're unlucky. Part of life. Whispers spread like wildfire through the class. Pheromones thickened, nervous feathers molted, chitons scraped anxiously. To the gathered aliens, it was inconceivable. To choose to share a planet with predators so fearsome? To laugh at their calls as though they were background noise? Madness. Absolute madness. And yet, The human hadn't flinched. Not once. The professor tapped the control note again, halting the recording. Remarkable, he murmured. His multifaceted eyes glittered with academic intrigue. For most here, the sound triggered acute survival responses. But the human brain filters it differently. Daniel only grinned wider, giving a small shrug. Guess we just grew up with it. The silence in the hall did not last long. It cracked beneath a dozen voices rising in disbelief, some shrill, some guttural, others almost musical, but all carrying the same note of horror. The professor clacked his mandibles together for order, but the phenomenal fog of fear still clung to the air, and the students could not keep their voices quiet. A serpentine alien uncoiled violently, its frill rising. You laugh at death? That sound, those vibrations, they are not entertainment. They are ancestral warnings. My kind fled for eons from lesser echoes of such predators. Another, feathered and wide-eyed, let out a trembling warble. Even in recordings, my body reacts. My wings quiver, my bones hollow with dread. And you, the avian pointed a clawed digit at Daniel. You mock it as if it were a child's rattle? Daniel blinked, momentarily taken aback by the intensity. He shifted in his chair, leaning forward now, no longer smirking. Look, he said slowly, I'm not mocking anything. Cougars are dangerous. I'm just saying they're not monsters. You don't freeze up when you hear them. You deal with it. That answer did little to soothe his classmates. A wave of nervous clicks, hisses, and buzzing filled the lecture hall. To them, the notion of dealing with such a sound was like saying you could politely ask a supernova to dim its light. The professor raised a clawed hand for calm. Perhaps we should examine this more carefully. Human Daniel, explain what you mean by deal with it. Daniel nodded, scratching at the stubble on his chin. Okay, back on Earth, there are predators. Always have been. Big cats, bears, wolves, even crocodiles in some regions. If you live near them, you take precautions. Keep livestock safe, travel in groups, carry deterrents. Most of the time, the animals avoid you anyway. They're not out hunting humans every night. So when you hear them, yeah, it might raise your heartbeat, but it doesn't paralyze you. It tells you to be alert, to prepare. A stunned pause followed. To the aliens, the very concept was incomprehensible. Their histories told of predators as extinction events, as disasters from which civilizations barely recovered. They had no cultural framework for coexistence with danger. Predators were not neighbors to be respected. They were nightmares that stalked in ancestral memory. The avian keened again. If such creatures stalked our skies, my people would never have left the trees. We would never have survived to build cities, let alone spacecraft. Daniel spread his hands in a gesture of resignation. Maybe that's just it. Humans didn't have a choice. We grew up surrounded by predators, so we learned to adapt. Sometimes we ran. Sometimes we fought. Sometimes we built walls. Sometimes we made weapons. But hiding forever? That wasn't an option. A chittering student with translucent skin raised a trembling appendage. And you survived this? Without constant casualties. The human chuckled softly. Oh, there were casualties. Lots of them. Back in the day. But we learned. We taught each other. Parents told kids what to do if they saw a bear or heard a cougar scream. We passed down the knowledge, not just the fear. That's how you beat predators. Not by trembling, but by understanding them. The words landed heavily. The aliens exchanged glances, their body language conveying a mix of disbelief and something else, an uncomfortable sort of respect. The professor clicked thoughtfully. Fascinating. For most species here, predation was either so overwhelming it drove them into perpetual prey behavior, or so minimal it barely shaped their evolution. But humanity, his eyes glittered. Humanity danced on the knife's edge. Neither wholly prey nor wholly predator. A balance that forged resilience. One reptilian student let out a low hiss. Resilience or recklessness? Daniel grinned, teeth flashing a way that made several classmates recoil instinctively. Maybe both, but we're still here. The debate swelled. Some students pressed forward with questions, unable to reconcile what they had heard with the human's calm. How could children live with such sounds in the night? Asked the avian. Feathers puffed in disbelief. They get used to it, Daniel answered. Parents tell them stories. Teach them rules. Don't run blindly. Don't make yourself small. Make noise if you need to scare something off. Fear's natural, but we don't let it rule us. Another, with faceted eyes, clicked nervously. But why not eliminate them? Eradicate such predators once technology allowed it. The human smile faded a little. Because predators belong. They're part of the ecosystem. Kill them all and you ruin the balance. Besides, we respect them. They're dangerous, sure, but also beautiful. The room went utterly still at that word. Beautiful. Aliens who had shivered at the sound of the Cougar's call stared at Daniel as though he'd grown a second head. To them, predators were not beautiful. They were catastrophe incarnate. The professor seized upon the moment. Do you see, students? This is cultural divergence at its deepest. What you interpret as pure threat, the human interprets as challenge, even admiration. Their species carries not just scars of predation, but pride. Daniel leaned back again, arms crossed, his grin returning. We learned to live alongside danger. It taught us to be clever, to be tough, to be human. And though the fear pheromone still clung thick in the air, something else had entered the room now. A seed of awe. For the first time, the aliens were not just afraid of the humans' reaction. They were beginning to understand it. The following day, the lecture hall was quieter than usual. Word of the Cougar incident, as some were already calling it, had spread throughout the academy. Students who hadn't been in the class the day before now arrived early, curious to see the human who had laughed at a predator's scream. When Professor Tlar entered, his mandibles clicked in amusement. It appears our class has gained spectators. So be it. Yesterday's lesson has presented us with opportunities. Let us continue. The lights dimmed again. This time, however, no sound immediately followed. Instead, the professor gestured toward Daniel. Human Daniel, your reaction provided us a unique insight. Today, we will explore the psychology of that reaction. Why does humanity laugh where others tremble? Dozens of alien eyes turned toward the human. Some glared with suspicion, others with curiosity, a few with a gleam of admiration. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Well, I wouldn't say we always laugh. Sometimes we scream too, or run. We're not fearless, but we've got this thing where we use humor to deal with fear. It takes the edge off. A chittering student raised a trembling limb. Explain. Okay, Daniel said, leaning forward. Picture this. You're camping with friends in the woods. You hear something. Branches snapping, low growl. Maybe even that cougar scream we listened to yesterday. Everyone freezes. Hearts racing. Skin crawling. But then someone cracks a joke. Guess Fluffy's hungry tonight. And suddenly you can breathe again. You're still scared, but now you can act. Fear doesn't paralyze you. A stunned silence followed. For many species, fear was absolute. Once triggered, it consumed every thought, every nerve, until escape or death. The notion that laughter, a frivolous, nonsensical noise, could disrupt fear was staggering. The professor clicked thoughtfully. So humor is a survival tool? Daniel nodded. Exactly. You make fun of the danger, and it feels smaller, manageable. Doesn't mean it is smaller. It's still a cougar or a bear or a storm, but if you believe you can handle it, you've already won half the fight. The avian student from yesterday raised a wing timidly. But what if the danger cannot be handled? What if escape is impossible? Daniel's expression grew serious. Then humor helps you die with courage, helps your friends fight a little longer, helps you face what's coming without losing yourself. The hall went utterly silent. Even the background hum of ventilation seemed to pause. To hear death spoken of so plainly was chilling. For most species, death was an unspeakable shadow. For the human, it was a certainty to be faced head-on. Finally, the reptilian hissed. You respect fear, but do not submit to it. Exactly, Daniel said, a faint smile returning. Fear's not our enemy. It keeps us alive. But if you let it control you, you're already dead. The professor seized on the moment, pacing across the platform. Observe, students. This is why humanity has thrived where others faltered. They do not deny fear, nor do they flee it blindly. They reshape it. They transmute terror into resolve. Humor, courage, even arrogance, tools forged in the crucible of predation. An insectoid student clattered their mandibles. But this is illogical. Fear exists to warn us, to run, to hide. How can altering it be beneficial? Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the desk, because running and hiding don't always work. Sometimes the predator's faster. Sometimes you're cornered. Fear tells you you're in danger, sure, but what you do next decides if you survive. Panic makes you sloppy. Humor, focus, even anger, they keep you sharp. He paused and added, it's like turning fear into fuel instead of chains. The words resonated. For prey-born species, fear had always been a chain, binding them to instinct. To see it reframed as fuel was revolutionary. A timid aquatic student bubbled a question through their translator. What of children? Surely younglings cannot endure such constant terror. Daniel chuckled softly. Kids grow up with it. Not every day, of course, but they learn early. Parents teach them. Don't wander off. Don't run from dogs. Don't poke at snakes. Sometimes they hear coyotes howling at night and ask what it means. Parents don't tell them. The world is ending. They say, that's just a song of the night. It's scary, sure, but it's also part of life. The aliens shivered. To them, predators were not songs of night. They were extinction given form. One brave insectoid clicked sharply. And if the children disobey, Daniel's eyes darkened. Sometimes they don't make it. That's the truth. But that loss teaches a rest. Humanity grew up paying that price until we learned better. Fear isn't just instinct, it's education. The hall erupted in hushed murmurs. Some students recoiled, horrified. Others stared in awe. The humans' casual acceptance of risk, even death, was both terrifying and magnetic. Professor Tlar lifted a claw. Let us test this further. Human Daniel, imagine you are stripped of weapons, alone in wilderness, and hear the call of this cougar. What then? Daniel tilted his head, considering. Depends. If it's far away, I keep calm, stay aware. If it's close, I make myself big, shout, throw rocks. Fire helps too. Humans have always used fire to scare predators. And if it comes at me, he shrugged, then I fight with whatever I've got. Gasps filled the hall. You would fight an apex predator barehanded? The reptilian hissed. Daniel smiled, but there was no arrogance in it this time. Only honesty. If it's me or the cat, yeah, I might not win, but I'll make it bleed. Maybe enough for it to back off. Fear makes you smarter, faster, stronger, if you use it right. The professor clicked his mandibles sharply, a sound of conclusion. There, students, the lesson is clear. Humanity does not escape fear. Humanity masters it. They laugh at the cougar scream not because it is harmless, but because a laugh is to refuse paralysis. To laugh is to fight. A ripple of awe spread through the lecture hall. Where once there had been only fear of the predator call, now there was something new, respect for the species that could stand against it. And in the quiet that followed, many students realized they had not just learned about predators. They had learned about humans. The academy cafeteria was louder than usual the following week. Word of the humans' reaction to the predator sound had spread far beyond Professor Tlar's class. Even students who had never met Daniel whispered his name with equal parts curiosity and unease. At one table, a group of insectoid students clicked nervously as they discussed it. At first I thought it was arrogance, one said, mandibles chittering. But the human did not boast. He explained. He laughed because laughter makes him strong. Nearby, a feathered avian fluffed her wings in agitation. Strong or insane. No rational species hears death and calls it beautiful. Yet she still found her eyes drifting toward Daniel across the room, where he sat eating with his usual calm, smiling as if he carried no weight at all. For the avian, that was the most unsettling part. He believed what he had said. In the days that followed, the questions began. First, timidly, a reptilian classmate approached him after lecture. Human Daniel, Tell me more of this cougar. Does it truly scream so that it chills even your blood? Daniel grinned. Yeah, sounds like a woman screaming sometimes. Creeps you out. But once you know it, you don't mistake it for anything else. Would you show us more? The human obliged. He pulled up recordings of wolves howling on the moon, bears roaring, coyotes yipping in chorus. The lecture hall filled with sound that made most students recoil or tremble, but they listened, because unlike before, there was a guide, someone who didn't just explain the danger, but the context. That, Daniel said when wolves howled, is the sound of a pack talking to each other. Dangerous if you're weak or alone, but not something to fear every night. People hear that sound camping, and it's spooky, but it also means the forest is alive. He showed them sharks gliding through ocean waters, lions roaring across the savannah, even crocodiles lurking in swamps. Each sound or image was met with awe, revulsion, and disbelief. You share your planet with these things? The avian gasped, feathers shivering. Share, compete, sometimes fight, Daniel said with a shrug. But predators keep us sharp. Without them, we wouldn't be who we are. The professor took advantage of the fascination. Each day, he wove Daniel's insights into broader lessons. Note, Tlar said, clicking his mandibles, how humans do not view predators solely as threats. They categorize, analyze, and, remarkably, admire them. This duality explains much of their expansionist capability. To a human, the unknown is not purely terror. It is a challenge. One insectoid raise a limb. But, Professor, does this not make them reckless? To walk among monsters willingly? The professor's antennae twitched. Perhaps, yet it also makes them adaptable. When other species hesitate, humans act. When others retreat, humans endure. The alien students murmured uneasily, but none could deny the truth. One evening, a group of students cornered Daniel in the common area. Not with hostility, but with curiosity that bordered on reverence. Human Daniel, the reptilian said, bowing slightly, tell us of more Earth predators. Tell us of the greatest danger your people faced. Daniel thought for a moment, then chuckled. You want scary? Try polar bears. Biggest land predator on Earth. White as snow, hunt across frozen wastelands. They'll stalk you for hours, waiting for you to tire. The students hissed, clicked, and fluffed in horror. And yet, Daniel continued, people live there. They build towns, hunt, fish. They carry rifles, travel in groups, and respect the bear. They don't abandon the land just because it's dangerous. The avian tilted her head. Respect. Always you use this word for predators. Why? Daniel's expression softened. Because predators make us stronger. They test us. Without them, maybe we'd have grown lazy, complacent. Instead, we learned fire, tools, cooperation. Predators shaped us. In a way, we owe them. The group fell silent, absorbing his words. To them, predators were only curses. To the human, they were teachers. Weeks later, the Academy's nickname for the incident stuck. The Day of the Cougar. Students whispered it with awe, and sometimes with laughter their own. When the recording of the predator call was played again for a later class, some of the aliens who had once cowered managed to stay steady, if only because they remembered Daniel's easy grin and phrase, "That's just a cougar." The phrase became a kind of joke among the students. When stress mounted, or when exams loomed, they muttered it to themselves. That's just a cougar. A way of saying, this feels terrifying, but it isn't the end. I can handle it. Unwittingly, the human had given them a new tool. At the final lecture of the term, Professor Tlar addressed the class. We began this course seeking to understand predators across the galaxy. Yet, what we have learned is more profound. Fear itself is a predator, one that stalks every sentient mind. Most species flee it. Humanity taught us to laugh at it. He turned his multifaceted gaze toward Daniel. And for that, we thank you. Daniel shifted awkwardly in his seat, unused to such attention. Hey, I just told you what we do back home. I'm no philosopher. But the look in the eyes of his classmates told him otherwise. To them, he wasn't just a classmate anymore. He was proof that fear could be beaten. That night, as Daniel walked back to his quarters, a young insectoid scuttled after him. Human Daniel, it asked softly, when you laugh at the cougar, were you truly unafraid? Daniel paused, considering. He smiled faintly. Nah, I was scared, same as anyone. But I laugh anyway. That's the trick. The insectoid stared at him for a long time, mandibles twitching, before nodding in slow understanding. And as Daniel disappeared into the corridor, the young alien whispered the words to itself, savoring their strength. That's just a cougar.